Hi there, sorry for the technical issues. We are back online and back in business. My name is Rossie Stone, and this is Dekko Comics, which we're doing in collaboration with Collins. And they are essentially, what they do is that they turn Key Stage 2 school curriculum information into colourful, entertaining comic strips. And we keep certain things in mind to try and make it as easy as possible for all kinds of learners, especially those who have dyslexia, autism, or any other particular difficulty with reading. So we color code the information and put where it's educational based and leave what is just character dialogue, black and white. But we also put along the footer all the main points covered in that comic as well. So it's got that educational function, but the most important thing is that it is a comic before education. The kids will see a comic, they will see entertainment before they see education, and that is the key ingredient. The fact that the kids are motivated to read it and enjoy it, and it's trying to be as fun as a Beano or Dandy comic, with or without the educational element, that is what engrosses kids in it and breaks down that motivational barrier. And why I'm so confident in this is because not just because of the results we've had hugely positive reviews. We've had parents and teachers send us lovely emails about how we got their daughter into literature, or their autistic school pupil is now making his own comics based on what he learns in school after reading these. But actually it's because it comes from my own history. As a teacher, if you've ever had that pupil in class who's always staring out the window or just seems like they're not trying hard enough in class, I was that pupil. I was one of the worst. I was consistently in the bottom of the bottom set of all academic classes. Anything that required reading or writing, I just completely flunked it. I found it so difficult. I would find that I'd get to the end of a paragraph and then realize I hadn't actually absorbed anything that I'd read. And it was the same with listening. I'd be listening, but then I'd phase out, trying to understand what the teacher was saying and keep up with the words at the same time was really difficult. So I'd phase out, and when I'd come back in, I wouldn't know where I was, with the lesson. And the only times this was different was as if the teacher was performing the lesson in some sort of way, or if it was in some sort of entertaining video. Now, essentially, it turned out that I was dyslexic. I found this out around primary 7. But discovering this didn't make things better. I tried all the dyslexia techniques, they didn't seem to work. I tried mind maps an awful lot. They often became a mind mess. I just didn't know how many points to put down. And it just ended up not helping me very much. So despite trying, I really, really tried. I understood how important grades were when I got into high school, and I tried really hard to get as high a grade as I possibly, or to do as well as I possibly could in the exams. I was working later than any of my friends were, and still I was getting bad grades. I could scrape a B if I was lucky, but I was still getting fails, I was still getting C's, and it didn't seem worth the trauma I was putting myself through for all that revision. So I eventually, when I got to my final academic exam in my 5th year of high school, I just thought, if I'm going to fail anyway, I might as well enjoy it, rather than put myself through all that pain of revision for very little reward again. So I turned a couple of pages of my revision notes into comic strips, and 2 things happened. This was fun to make. I enjoyed making it because I'd always prospered at art, and that was always my go-to subject where I felt comfortable. So I'd always loved making and reading comics anyway. So I found a way to make revision fun. But weirdly, this was even more fun to read. I could understand the information when it was presented in this format. It was easier to understand, it was easier to remember, because I now had a visual and a point of narrative to remember my information by. But the fact that I'd even found a way to make revision put a smile on my face and made me want to make more and more of these comics out of my revision notes, that was revolutionary to me. So, long story short, when it got to my exams, I was expecting to fail because no one had ever told me this was an okay way to revise. But I thought at least I was doing it on my own terms. But I ended up getting an A in that exam that I applied these comics to. That was the first A I'd ever gotten in any academic exam. And frankly, my reaction was that I was kicking myself. This was the grade as good as any other grade for the people in my class. I had lots of other high flyers in my class who were getting A. I got the same grade as them, and if I'd have figured this comic technique out earlier, it could have saved me from so much grief, so much self-esteem. It could have made me realize I could do it. It could have opened so many possibilities to me as a pupil, and I could have had a lot of a better relationship with my subjects and with school. So I went away, did my studies in art school, did a year as an art teacher, and then decided this was always in the back of my mind that this could help other people like me. If it could just help 10 other people like me, that each person it helps is a person's entire world, and that was worth it to me because I'd been through the troubles and strife of it. So that is where these comics were born, and ever since we've started testing them and prototyping them, they've received really good results. We started with a few schools in Glasgow, and they've come up with excellent results. The pupils were demanding more. The way we tested how these worked was actually on 3 different factors. It was engagement, digestibility, and clarity. And basically engagement, how much they enjoyed it; digestibility, how much they retained the information; and clarity, how easy the information was to understand in this comic format. And basically when it came down to it, when we ran the tests on all these different schools, we deliberately tested it on a variety of pupils with dyslexia, pupils with forms of autism, people with ADHD, people who had behavioural issues, pupils who had no problem at all, pupils who were the high flyers in class. We tested it on all of them, and a variety of age groups too. And what we found with engagement, across the board, everyone enjoyed it. We couldn't find a single person who didn't enjoy it. We asked them questions of did they like it. They always put yes in capital letters, exclamation marks, or we want more. So that was never out of the question. As soon as they saw the front cover with all the colours, everything about it did not speak school. It spoke entertainment. So they always give a very positive reaction to that. With digestibility, we gave the kids the comics to take home for a week, and I basically said to them, I would like you to read the comics as many or as few times as you like, and I'm going to test you on them next week. But there's no punishment or no right or wrong way to read these. I just want you to be honest with how many times you've read them when you come back. And so they did. And when they came back, I got them before they answered any questions. I was basically asking them questions on the comics, on the material within them. And I basically asked, before we started that, I asked them to put the number of how many times they'd read the comic in the top right corner of their page. So it did, and then they answered the questions, and marking the questions afterwards. The kids who had read the comics once, they could answer some of the questions right, sometimes not very many. The kids who'd read the comics 3 to 4 times could remember most, if not all, of the questions correctly, and that proved that it could be used as a revision material. If they wished to utilise it that way, it could be. It still stood as something that could engage pupils in any particular topic, because we covered a variety of topics as well. But if they wanted to use it for revision, it could be used effectively, like it was for me in my exams. What was even more exciting was that all kinds of learners were responding to this. There were very reading savvy pupils who prefer to read, and that's always going to be the case as long as you've got different pupils. But even pupils who preferred to read still enjoyed and appreciated these comics. So when it came to clarity, the third thing, we were cheeky. We deliberately made one of the comics based on advanced higher biology, which was too advanced for the primary 6 and 7s we were showing this comic to at the time, but we still presented it in this sort of Beano-like format, in this sort of comic-friendly, nice, understandable story format, and they passed the digestibility test. But 2 months later, I was having a meeting with one of the teachers, and the teacher prior to the meeting on the day had basically said, taken a couple of his pupils aside from the session I'd had with them 2 months earlier, and had asked them, so what did you actually learn from that comic? And he was expecting maybe to get a skimpy answer or two, but basically they were really excited. The kids were riffing off all these facts from the comic that they'd learned. They were telling the teacher what photosynthesis was, what chloroplasts were, what animal and plant cells were, and they didn't understand this in the context of advanced higher biology, but they understood it in the context of the comic. So even it could translate complicated terms to them, and that are beyond their reading level, when presented in something that is more naturally like entertainment. So why is this? And I truly, strongly believe it's, why does a kid remember what happens in their favourite TV show so easily? Why do they want to watch that TV show again? Why do they remember the tune and the lyrics of one of their favourite songs? Why do they have no problem with listening to that song again and again? Same with their favourite sports. All these things. And I do believe it's down to entertainment. Entertainment is such a strong communicator of information. There are so many products out there that they try to be education, entertaining education, but they focus on education first and entertainment second, which to me is putting the cart before the horse. What Dekko tries to do is it very consciously puts entertainment first, and that doesn't undermine the education, being entertaining with or without the educational element. It just communicates the education through the entertainment. And that way, if there's no reason, I think, why school work for any pupil needs to be a boring factor or a chore. We have a philosophy we go by in our company, which is learning is never boring, but how it is presented can be. And we try to focus that it's not the fact that these pupils are born against maths or born against science or anything like that. Maybe it's the fact that they don't respond so well to they don't respond so well to a sheet full of words or a bland PowerPoint presentation, or if a teacher is really unenthusiastic about the way they're talking about the lesson, maybe that is harder for the kids to get into. Why should we rely solely on each individual child's skill with reading and writing? Because we tell kids all the time that we're all born different, so we're going to get different kinds of thinking out there. But I don't think the educational system was ever built to factor in all these different kinds of learning, all these different kinds of teaching. It was during the Industrial Revolution, they were looking for academics, for readers and mathematicians and such like that. So it was built for that, but not so much for the artistic thinkers. Are we doing okay for time?
Yeah, we've got a question.
Oh, we have a question. What's the question?
It's from Dave, and he asks, are you limited by what subjects you can teach through your comics?
No, not at all. Any subject can be turned into a comic. We believe if it can be written down, it can be turned into a comic. At the back of each Dekko comic, you'll find the topics it covers in that particular comic. Each comic will always have maths and English, but we also go for language, like French and German. We also go for biology, physics, history, and you can even see we're in issue 4, which is the most recent one. We have actually included PSE as well, and social skills and stuff like that, and you can see geography there as well. So absolutely not, I would only see it as a challenge, frankly, if someone came with a particular topic, but I think anything can be turned into a comic. And I don't think enough of these topics have been, I don't think there's a lack of comics of all these topics out there because it hasn't worked. It's just not been a very celebrated or subscribed to way of communicating information until recent years. And we have experts like Paul Elixo, who's a professor in Sheffield Hallam University. He's been studying comic communication for about 20 years. And he's been trying to propose it as a very valid way of helping people understand and absorb information. Because if you rely on the skill of reading solely, reading is a very valuable skill, a crucial skill, but it is a skill nonetheless. But we're not born with the ability to read. We have to learn it as we grow. But we are born with our senses. We come into the world and we immediately start using our visual sense, our taste, touch, sound, and movement. And so things that we associate with entertainment are a lot more sensitive to our senses. So that's why I think Dekko works. It's a particularly strong visual medium, and it also uses things like humor and storytelling to get that across. And yes, sorry, so Dave, to answer your question directly, I think any of these, any topic can be turned into a story, can be turned into a series of panels and pictures, and characters and stuff like that. That's all good. So should we be finishing now? Yes. And to wrap it all up, basically, in a nutshell, why comics are a particularly valuable medium is it forces the teacher, being the people who make the comics, to be concise. They can only put so much information in each panel. So that alone is surely making it worth a technique to explore. I do workshops where I come to schools and I can teach people how to use the technique from my own experience and how they can make any entertainment into education. But to get the best stuff, buy Dekko. That's my line. Excellent. Thank you.